Hey everybody. I thought this week I would share something from a Buddhist text. This is from the Ariyapariyesana Sutta, and it is the Buddha describing his own turning towards what he calls the noble search, the search for meaning and the search for the unchanging in the world. And so this is in the Buddha's own words, speaking to monks who have taken after his path. So he says, good monks, it is fitting that you, as sons of good families who have gone forth out of faith from home of the homeless life, should gather for Dharma discussion. When you have gathered, you have two duties, either Dhamma discussion or noble silence. Monks, there are these two searches, ignoble search and noble search. And which is the ignoble search? There is the case where a person, being subject to himself to birth, seeks happiness in what is likewise subject to birth. Being subject himself to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, he seeks happiness in what is likewise subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement. And what may be said to be subject to birth? Spouses and children are subject to birth, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to birth. Subject to birth are these acquisitions, and one who is tied to them, infatuated with them, who has totally fallen for them, being subject to birth, seeks likewise what is subject to birth. And what may be said to be subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Spouses and children, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowls and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement. Subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement are these acquisitions, and one who is tied to them, infatuated with them, who has totally fallen for them, being subject to birth, seeks what is likewise subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement. This is the ignoble search. And what is the noble search? There is the case where a person, himself being subject to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth, seeks the unborn, unexcelled, rest from the yoke, unbinding. Himself being subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeing the drawbacks of aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeks the agingless, the illnessless, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, unexcelled rest from the yoke, unbinding. This is the noble search. I too, monks, before my self-awakening, when I was still just an unawakened bodhisattva, being subject myself to birth, sought what was likewise subject to birth. Being subject myself to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, sought happiness in what was likewise subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement. The thought occurred to me, why do I, being subject myself to birth, seek what is likewise subject to birth? Being subject myself to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, why do I seek what is likewise subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement? What if I, being subject myself to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth, were to seek the unborn, unexcelled rest from the yoke, the unbinding? What if I, being subject myself to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeing the drawbacks of aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, were to seek the agingless, illnessless, deathless, sorrowless, unexcelled rest from the yoke, unbinding? So, at a later time, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessings of youth in the first stage of life, and while my parents, unwilling, were crying with tears streaming down their faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. Having thus gone forth in search of what might be skillful, seeking the unexcelled state of sublime peace, I went to Alara Kalama, and on arrival said to him, Friend Kalama, I want to practice in this Dhamma and discipline. When this was said, he replied to me, You may stay here, my friend. This Dhamma is such that an observant person can soon enter and dwell in his own teacher's knowledge, and having realized it for himself through direct knowledge. Thank you for listening. I will see you on Saturday. Please join us. Read the mailing list if you would like to join, but you are not on the mailing list. Please add a comment or write to olimaretreat@sfvedanta.org, and I will add you to the list. Take care.